In 2017, in western Myanmar, a country also known as Burma, the military attacked the largely Muslim Rohingya communities in Rakhine State. Soldiers burned homes, schools, stores, and mosques. More than 9,000 Rohingya were killed. Burma's Path to Genocide, an exhibition at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, describes the plight of the Rohingya in Myanmar through videos, pictures, personal accounts, and historic documentation. During a recent speech at the museum, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the Myanmar military's widespread and systematic mass atrocities against the Rohingya genocide.
Today marks the 8th, as I have determined that members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity against Rohingya.
Well, I think the determination by the U.S. helps guard against genocide denial. It sets a record. I think the Secretary of State Blinken was very clear in his remarks and his explanation of why the determination was made, to show all of the evidence not only here in the Holocaust Museum's exhibition, but evidence collected by the State Department, by independent investigators, by the Rohingya community themselves, to show that, yes, a genocide did happen.
According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, since 2017, about 900,000 Rohingya have fled their homes in Myanmar's Rakhine State and found refuge in Bangladesh. In their testimonies, Rohingya survivors describe losing their children, husbands, and parents. Their displacement is a dire consequence of decades-long systematic elimination, first through paperwork, then by brute force, says Andrew Gittleman.
The Rohingya people who we've spoken with said there was a time when they belonged in Burma, in Myanmar, and they were, they worked as civil servants, they worked as teachers, they were allowed to go to university, they were allowed to access rights and opportunities within the country just as other people would. And yes, they were a minority in terms of their ethnicity and religion, but they were not treated the way that they were later on in the 20th century.
Gradually, Gittleman says, Myanmar's military regime chipped away at the identity of the Rohingya. Authorities in Myanmar confiscated their national ID cards. By 1982, the Rohingya, a Muslim minority within a largely Buddhist country, were no longer recognized.
The 1982 citizenship law has been highlighted as one of the key moments, so that resulted in most Rohingya losing their citizenship. And then now, as a stateless group in the country, they said that formed the foundation for then more acts of discrimination, of persecution.
The Rohingya, who fled the persecution, now live in cramped refugee camps in Bangladesh, unable to move on, many falling victims to traffickers. Noor Mohammed is one of the refugees hoping to escape the camp for a better life.
Living in this camp, the situation is very bad. We are living in one 90-square-foot room with 8 family members, my wife, my parents, and also my children. So it is not enough. At least in another country, we are going to get basic human rights.
Gittleman says the Holocaust Museum's Rohingya exhibition serves as a reminder that genocides must be prevented long before they happen.
There are always warning signs, and there are things that can be done if policymakers were to prioritize the protection of civilians, the protection of minority groups who might be at risk for mass atrocities. When we see genocide against the Rohingya, we see attacks on civilians in Ukraine, it is so late.
Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.